a group of men suddenly broke into the woman's house. The woman's husband is Rubens. He used to be a member of Congress, but he hasn't been involved in politics for many years.
Nenhum não. O senhor vem com a gente.
E pra onde?
Prestar depoimento.
The woman immediately tensed up. She is aware of the current situation in Brazil. The military government conducts a white terror campaign. They are restricting freedom of speech, censoring the news media, arresting intellectuals and students. As long as there is the slightest hint of evidence, they can make a person disappear without a trace. Although her husband hasn't engaged in anti-government activities, the friends he frequently associates with, it's hard to guarantee there are no insurgents among them. Thinking of this, her breathing became rapid. At that moment, their young daughter cheerfully pushed the door open, came in.
Cadê o papai?
She was unaware of what was happening. Rubens smiled lightly as usual. The daughter asked him where he was going dressed handsomely. Rubens pretended to be relaxed and said he was going to the office to help these gentlemen with some matters. I'll be back soon. Before leaving, the woman kissed her husband goodbye. The husband comforted her, saying, I'll be back for the cheese pastries. But the woman never expected that this would be the last thing her husband said to her. After husband taken away, the group of men did not leave. They closed the curtains, then searched the house thoroughly, monitoring everyone's every move. Even the phone was tapped. Second daughter holding ball ready to go out, but was blocked by one of the men.
Ninguém sai até seu pai voltar.
Until the evening, the husband still hadn't returned. The woman became anxious and couldn't sleep at all. The middle night, the people then was swapped with another group. The husband's study was also turned upside down. The next morning, the husband still hadn't come back. The woman and the second daughter were taken away. The sound of police sirens roared past. The woman felt her heart was about to jump out of her chest. At an intersection, the man in the front seat suddenly handed them 2 hoods. After putting on the hoods, the whole world went dark. The fear in the woman's heart grew even stronger. When she saw light, the woman found herself sitting in a dimly lit interrogation room. She took off the hood. Someone took her photo. Then the interrogator began to ask questions. The woman's name was Eunice. She said she wanted to see her husband and daughter. Only then can you answer the question, the interrogator said coldly. Your husband is just upstairs. He has already told us everything he knows. Although Eunice was mentally stressed, her mind was very clear. This false accusation, her responses were flawless. At that moment, a scream was heard from outside. A prison guard was brutally beating a newly arrived prisoner. Eunice's breathing became more rapid. Seeing they got nothing from her, the interrogator handed her a roster with photos attached, asking her to identify anyone she knew. Eunice found that there were many people on it. All of them were their friends, but she didn't dare to identify anyone for fear of harming herself and her friends. Seeing her lack of cooperation, the interrogator used her child threat. They had been monitoring Eunice's family for a long time. They knew everything about her family's situation. Even mentioning her eldest daughter studying in London, Eunice turned pale with fear. Her lips trembled. This time she didn't dare to hide anything. She identified a teacher named Martha. After the questioning ended, she was hooded again. As she was taken out, she anxiously called out her daughter's name.
Minha filha tá aqui?
Mãe? Mariana, o que tá acontecendo?
Senta aí.
Eunice was sent to a solitary cell. The guard warned her to speak less, or else you will, anger them. She didn't know how much time passed. Eunice only felt drowsy. The world before her eyes was spinning. She kept thinking about how her husband was doing. Is he still alive? Would her daughter be tortured by them? Could they ever get out? She really couldn't understand. Just a few days ago, her family was living a typical happy life. Her husband Rubens was an engineer. With a substantial income, they had a villa by the sea in Rio. She had 5 daughters and 1 son. The children were all lively and adorable. Although there was tension outside, their family was stable and comfortable. But overnight, the white terror destroyed their once happy life. Just as her thoughts were in turmoil, a strong light suddenly flashed into her eyes. The prison guard took her to the interrogation room again. The interrogator asked her to identify the roster again. Interrogation ended. She suddenly heard a woman scream.
Eliana. Cala a boca.
Eunice was horrified by the screams, making her scalp tingle. She mistakenly thought it was her daughter being tortured. The escorting guard couldn't bear it. He secretly told her, "Your daughter is no longer here." Only then did Eunice breathe a sigh of relief, but she began to worry whether her daughter had left or had been transferred to another place. After returning to the cell, she asked the guard how many days she had been there. The guard said, "You have been here for 5 days." As for more details, he had nothing more to offer. At that moment, she heard the guards outside cleaning the blood-stained corridor. The swishing sound of the brushes kept echoing in her mind. 5 days had already passed, and her husband was likely in grave danger. But she was locked up here, unable to do anything. She could only listen to the occasional screams and silently pray. On 10th day, Eunice was finally released. But for the inexplicable imprisonment over these days, no one offered her any explanation. Eunice returned home and found that Elena had already come back. She breathed a sigh of relief and hurried to the bathroom, shower, wanting to wash away the fear that had seeped into her pores over these days. After showering, Eunice went straight to her room to sleep. She hadn't had a good night's sleep in many days. She didn't know how long she had slept. When she opened her eyes, she saw Elena. Elena told her mother that those people asked her a lot of questions. She replied she didn't know. The next day, she was released. But she never saw her father throughout. Recent newspapers reported that he had escaped. But according to her father's friends, this is a lie. Eunice immediately sought out a few friends to discuss a plan. The troublesome now is the military doesn't acknowledge that Rubens has been arrested. They also can't provide evidence to prove he has been detained. As a result, it's impossible to use international pressure on the government. Eunice suddenly thought of her husband's car. The car was parked in a military parking lot. Perhaps this was a clue. She went to the parking lot with a lawyer to claim the car. But the soldier guarding the vehicles refused to disclose Rubens' whereabouts and told them to apply to the federal police. The lawyer clearly knew that the police and the military government were in cahoots. The only hope now was through the courts. But she needed evidence to prove that Rubens was indeed taken by the military. Eunice thought of the teacher Martha, whom she identified in the interrogation room. She and Rubens were arrested sequentially, and even sat in the same vehicle. But after experiencing the terrifying prison interrogation, Martha was as silent as a mouse. She really didn't want to risk herself for others. She never wanted to go back to that prison in her life. On the way back, her youngest son kept asking why Dad's car was back. But he wasn't. Eunice had to brush it off by saying he was on a trip. But such words could only fool a child. The older daughters had already realized something. But what Eunice didn't expect was that after her husband disappeared, the surveillance never stopped. There were always cars parked in front of their house, watching them like 24/7. Her husband was gone, and a large group of children were waiting for her to support them. The family's finances quickly ran into trouble. But without her husband's signature, the bank wouldn't let her withdraw money at all. She could only sell her treasured foreign currency to meet urgent needs. Whenever she had time, Eunice would go to her husband's friends, hoping they could provide some clues. But these people also didn't know why Rubens was arrested. The current military government is like a mad dog, biting anyone it sees. Although Rubens did not directly participate in armed struggle, he did help provide shelter for exiled political prisoners with them. He also had dealings with foreign media. These could all be used against him. However, they believed these were not very serious issues. Many people who were arrested for this were soon released. Hearing this, Eunice felt a glimmer of hope again. To reassure the children, she tried hard to remain calm and maintain their usual life as much as possible. But that day, a sudden miserable dog howl came from outside. The family dog was run over by someone tailing them. Eunice immediately thought of her missing husband and the terrifying experiences of the past few days.
O que vocês querem? Cadê meu marido? Vai embora! Sai daqui, vai embora! Sai!
Eunice was trying hard to control her emotions. The children looked at their mother, all knowing that something major had happened at home, but their mother did not tell them. At this point, all Eunice could do was continuously gather information, find her husband's whereabouts. That night, a document was suddenly slipped through the door crack. After a fierce internal struggle, Martha decided to provide her with evidence of Rubens' arrest. In her testimony, she said that she indeed saw Rubens before being transferred from the prison. She heard his voice asking for water. Just this one sentence made Eunice realize that her husband must have suffered inhuman torture in prison. She quickly called the lawyer, submitting evidence. Eunice did not get to see her husband released. Instead, she received the terrible news that her husband had already died. Although Eunice was mentally prepared, but upon receiving this news, she was still shocked. Soon she became determined that even so, she would make executioners publicly confess and face trial in court. But this was nothing short of a pipe dream, because the bodies of the victims were either buried in the forest or directly thrown into the sea. Without a body, there was no way to prove it, and no one came forward testifying because they were afraid of being disappeared. Eunice felt a chill over her body. She knew her husband would never return, and she couldn't even seek justice for him. At this moment, all she could do was restrain her emotions to minimize the impact on the children. However, when the family gathered in the dining room and saw the scenes of reunion and laughter, Eunice still couldn't bear the heart-wrenching pain. They used to be so happy too. But within just a few days, everything collapsed suddenly. Without her husband's income, they found it difficult to make ends meet. Moreover, living here, Eunice would wake up in the middle of the night, recalling the scene of her husband being taken away. This place had clearly become a place of sorrow. Eunice decided to sell the house and move back to her husband's hometown, Sao Paulo. Before moving, Eunice accepted an interview with foreign media. The photographer wanted to take a group photo of them to highlight the tragic situation of political victims. And to garner sympathy from the international community, reporters asked not to smile taking photos, just keep a straight face. But Eunice loudly told the children, "We must keep smiling," because she knew very well When the wheels of time roll over, ordinary people like them, as insignificant as dust, the best retaliation is not to cry bitterly, but to keep smiling. At lunch, Eunice announced they would be moving to live in Sao Paulo. The children were emotional. What about Dad? Eunice could only tell them, it might take you a long time to understand. And so, the family got on the bus to Sao Paulo. The children were heavy-hearted. Perhaps from this moment on, they vaguely realized Dad would never really come back. In an instant, they all seemed to have grown up, only in such a cruel way. Soon, 25 years passed. The time came to 1996. Brazil had entered the military dictatorship. Over the years, Eunice supported 6 children on her own, not knowing how many setbacks and hardships she endured. But she was not defeated. Instead, she became braver each time to seek justice for her husband. She returned to university to study law. After obtaining her degree, she kept collecting evidence, trying to clear her husband's name. But all of this was even more difficult than she imagined. 25 years had passed, let alone a public trial. Even the death notice for her husband had not been issued. Until this day, she finally received a phone call. Her husband Rubens was persecuted to death, and a death notice was issued for him. As she walked into admin building, a security guard sincerely said, "Ma'am, congrats." Over the years, he had seen Eunice walk into this building countless times. Her incredible perseverance moved him. Now, she finally received official recognition, and the long-awaited justice. He was happy for her as well. After receiving her husband's death notice, Eunice showed a relieved and content smile. This was the relief after a long 25-year struggle, and the comfort of finally seeking justice for her husband. Facing the media cameras, she held up her husband's death certificate high. That thin piece of paper had now become a spear piercing through lies, she accused in front of the cameras. Forced disappearance is one of the most brutal acts of dictatorship. When one person is killed, others are subjected to eternal psychological torment. This is a trampling of the law, and also a destruction of humanitarianism. A reporter asked, "Don't you think that after the return of democracy, the government has more urgent issues than pursuing the past?"
Não. Eu acho que é preciso indenizar as famílias e fazer o mais importante, que é esclarecer e julgar todos os crimes cometidos durante a ditadura, porque se isso não acontecer, nada impede que eles sigam sendo praticados impunemente.
This belated death certificate also allowed Eunice's children to fully accept their father's death. Looking at the familiar yet unfamiliar face in the photo, they were filled with mixed emotions. The youngest daughter suddenly asked her brother, "When did you bury him?" Brother's taken aback. He didn't understand what she meant. The sister said, "When did you realize he would never come back?" The brother thought for a moment and said, "I think it was when I saw Mom donating his clothes. About a year and a half after we moved here." "What about you?" The sister said, "I think it was likely when we left Rio." After saying this, the siblings fell silent simultaneously. In their hearts, a black hole suddenly appeared. Buried there was their beloved father, and those happy, beautiful times. As time passed day by day, although the government acknowledged Rubens' death, they did not prosecute the guilty dictators. Eunice had no choice but to place the notice of her husband's death at the end of the appeal documents. At this moment, she finally found peace. Because she had done absolutely everything she could, Eunice could finally face her husband's passing, and began to document everything that happened that day. She wanted to use these words to record the emotional journey after her loved ones disappeared, and firmly tell the world how filthy and terrifying dictatorship and white terror are. Another 18 years passed. Eunice's children had all started their own families. She also developed Alzheimer's disease. Past memories gradually became blurred, but when she saw the list of persecuted individuals in the news, she clearly recognized her husband's name and photo. At that moment, a sparkle appeared in her eyes. Longing and pain are equally eternal. But unfortunately, the government's conclusion remained that the body had not yet been found. Although the regret of the deceased can never return, but Eunice and her children had already built a grave for him in their hearts. The wheel of history gently rolls on, and a family endures more than half a century of suffering. But such tragedies are by no means isolated in human history. Dictatorial rule and white terror are like ghosts that cannot be completely sealed away, ready to return to the world at any moment.